one well-trained team can defeat 10,000 individuals. You only have to defeat a few of them. The rest of them are going to lay their arms down because they're not equipped to deal with that.
I see.
You become a member of a well-armed and well-trained team. And that's what a well-regulated militia, the necessary ingredient to maintaining a free state. Read the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I remember you explaining that when you spoke at the Bamacary conference.
Only time the word necessary appears in the Constitution, and it's necessary for the security of a free state.
Ron Holland, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. I appreciate, like you don't know, the invitation to be here with you.
I really appreciate it. Well, Ron, so we met at the Bamacary conference.
Correct.
And listening to your speech there was just so fascinating to me. There's just not very many people talking about the things that you're talking about. And I think that it's very important that people understand. And I really appreciate your courage in standing up to do that.
Yeah.
Could you please explain to the audience a little bit of your background so they can better understand how knowledgeable you are on this subject that we're going to talk about in this podcast?
Sure. I was born in Mississippi, graduated Mississippi State University with a degree in electrical engineering with a focus on power. I worked my way through engineering school at Mississippi Power in Laurel, so I graduated with 2 years of experience. I came to Alabama, went to work for Alabama Power, and as a power distribution engineer. And at the end of 20 years, I left them on good terms and with a very nice severance package. Those were 20 good years. I worked with some of the best people I've ever worked with in my life, people that just sacrifice. These are the guys and gals that climb out of bed at 2 a.m. and go out in stormy weather to restore people's power.
Yeah.
And, that was my leading charge. Extend service to new customers, but maintain electric power, maintain service to our customers. But I was ready for something different, and they were in a downsizing mode, and I was on the very leading edge of that, and I was offered a very nice severance package that enabled me to start my own business. So I've been in business myself since then, and the past, since 2008, I've been involved in power systems, remote, or what I would call renewable energy type, alternate energy power systems, which primarily means solar. There are some other aspects to that. Now, I've actually started 3 successful businesses in my life, but and I still participate in some roles in the first business I started. But I really became interested in alternate energy systems in 2001 on September 11th, 2001. That was my wake-up call. Now, I'd been away from the power company for some time at that point, but when I processed what happened on 9/11, and I'm ashamed to say it took me longer than when I look back and review, my thoughts at the time. Part of it, I didn't want to accept the truth of that event. But the truth is, I was not living in the world I thought I was living in. And when I realized that I bought my power I bought my food. I bought my water. I didn't own or control a single thing I needed to meet my obligation to my family. So that required that I do something, and something that I would prefer to have not done. But that dependence on purchased power, it came because I'm not discounting 3,000 people that died on 9/11, but those were symbolic targets. Had they wanted to kill people, they could have done something different and killed a lot more of us.
Absolutely.
But the Twin Towers, the symbol of financial strength. The Pentagon, the symbol of military strength. The plane that went down in Pennsylvania, we believe it was going to target the Capitol, the symbol of political strength. And the one that didn't get off the ground, we think would have hit the White House. If they can change where our chief executive sleeps, they can change anything.
Yes.
Now, to me, if they really want to get us, the low-hanging fruit is the power grid.
And that's such an inspirational story, Ron, and that's why I wanted to have you on this podcast today, just to let the audience know. So we are going to go into the power grid. That's something that we all worry about. A lot of us talk about World War III and nuclear bombs, and at the end of the day, why would they do that? Why would they hit us with a nuke when all they have to do is take down our power grid? And some experts say within a year, 90% of the population would be killed. Well,
there are multiple ways that we could be attacked. And in varying degrees, it would render either sections of the country or perhaps the entire North America as nearly uninhabitable. Again, from my perspective, understanding that during the 20 years I worked as a power distribution engineer, I worked numerous major outages. In the Southeast, that means a hurricane. Now, if you've ever seen the aftermath of a hurricane, it looks like Gaza. Everything is demolished.
Terrifying.
It is. Now, these are localized events. It may cover a wide area, but there is interior to that enough support to move in and rebuild things, which we did. If you came along 4, 5, 6 years later, the power was restored, life had returned to normal. You give it 10 years, you can't tell the event ever happened. So to me, I couldn't conceive of an event so bad that we couldn't rebuild it. That was just nowhere in my mind that anything could happen that we couldn't fix it. But the 9/11 event didn't process in my mind. In the America that I grew up in, even bank robbers, after a hard day's work, want to come home, put their feet up on an ottoman and watch a little TV. This is a different world. And it's a different world than, it's changed dramatically. It's probably my lifespan and those that experience the period of time that I grew up in have seen more radical change in this country than at any other time, except perhaps for the revolution.
Yes.
But the idea that someone would willingly destroy without a thought for how they were going to make it through it, or the men that perpetuated 9/11 died in the act. That kind of malicious behavior just had never entered my mind. But when I did process it, my responsibility when I was working with the utility companies, my responsibility started at the substation. and went to the customer's meter. We designed and built a system to serve the country I grew up in. The assumption was that people would behave in a civil manner. Well, 9/11 was my wake up that people will not behave in a civil manner. If any people didn't understand it then, they certainly should after 2020 and 2021.
Couldn't agree more.
So COVID was not a wake up for me. I was already conscious of it. And I'm surprised that nobody has really initiated and organized a 9/11 type attack on substation transformers. Now, there have been some attacks. There have been many attacks on substation transformers. The largest one occurred in 2013 in Coyote, California, just outside San Jose. It's in the spring of the year. We don't know how many attackers, but they cut communication lines and then they shot 17 large power transformers. Took them about 20 minutes. Now, substations are monitored. We do have remote monitoring. And so we would know if something happened. These people were smart enough to cut those communication. These were fiber optic cables. It wasn't that the sensor didn't know something happened. It couldn't tell anyone.
Oh, wow.
So there was evidence left on the scene. By the way, you can still look this up. Just look up the Metcalf, METCALF substation attack. There was evidence left on the scene, snack wrappers and brass. No fingerprints. So this was an intentional act, I think, meant to probe. Could they do it and get away with it? We don't know who did it. We don't know why. It was deemed terrorism. No duh.
Now, why do you think that is, that no one has attempted a 9/11 style attack?
They're not ready to pull it off yet.
I see.
They do things on their schedule.
Okay.
So to tell you how prepared we are, this was other people's wake-up call. So there are organizations in California that serve over the utilities that pulled people together and discussed how to secure our transformer substations. And the vulnerability is here. We built this for a civil society. These things are along the roadside. They're not remotely located. They're not protected. A chain link fence to keep the public out because of safety reasons.
I see.
But everybody knows where they are. It's easy. They're easily found, and most people are so used to their presence, they pass by them without notice. But California jumped on this, and the federal government investigated this and passed the information to all the utilities in the U.S., recommended have spare transformers. 2 years later, the same substation yard was attacked again, this time by thieves. They cut the fence, entered, stole some construction equipment, and left. I don't know if those people have ever been caught. That's a little more petty of an offense, and it's a little more difficult, unless you're going to use it privately use this equipment privately in some way where it's off the radar, you're likely to be caught. But the point is that it happened after security was increased. Now, there are a lot of videos out today about the vulnerability of our power grid. Sean Ryan's had several guests on his podcast. Tucker Carlson has had some as well. So it's not an unusual topic. I'm going to have some points of disagreement with some of those guests. Some of them think that, because, by the way, that Metcalf 17 large power transformers taken out, it didn't result in disruption of power to a lot of customers.
Okay.
We built the system with some redundancy. And in the areas that I was responsible for, we could lose a substation transformer, one, and feed those customers from surrounding substations.
Okay, so there's backup power if that was to happen to one of our substations.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Look, we do an extra good job protecting them from the highest vulnerability, which is lightning. So now the distribution lines is like a spider web. You can't protect every transformer to the degree that we do the substation transformers. But the substation transformers, well, all transformers either raise the power voltage or lower it. We want it high if we're going to transmit it a long distance. So it'll be stepped up right outside of a generating plant. Some of these are 500,000 volts, 500 kV lines, a very popular voltage for transmission, moderate distances, 230 kV. And then, so you might have a 115 kV or a 230 kV power source coming to a substation yard, and then you'll have transformers in that yard to step the voltage down to distribution level. Well, I'm a distribution engineer, so now you're talking my game. And that distribution line are what you see going up and down roads. You'll see poles with transformers on them that step that transmission voltage, the distribution voltage down to user level. Typically in a home, it's going to be 120, 240 volt AC power. So one transformer may have thousands and thousands of customers. Yes, there are other substation transformers in the vicinity that if one transformer is lost, we can pick that load up and cover it. But if you attack multiple substations, there's going to be some loads that we cannot cover. And if you carefully select these loads, these transformers, it's going to be impossible to fix that quickly.
So, Ron, what do you think are the biggest threat to our power grid is? If we were to have our power grid taken down, what do you think the most likely scenario would be?
Jonathan, there are probably half a dozen horses in that race. It doesn't matter which one wins, we lose. There are some natural phenomena that may affect our grid. You've heard of the solar flares and solar storms. There was one in the late 1800s that took down the telegraph lines in the United States. There will be others. There's no way we can avoid that, and there's little we can do other than what we've already done to protect ourselves from that eventuality. There are cyber attacks. That is certainly a possibility. When I was with the utility, I knew some guys in generation, and you want to talk about a complex system. Power generation. Utilities have modern generating plants. The cost to generate a kilowatt hour is lower than some of the older plants. And they've got some that are so old and archaic, they don't want to fire them up until they have to, because the cost of generating the kilowatt hours much more than the more modern plants.
I see.
So you have all of these generating plants, not just in one generating cooperative like the Southern Company, but they're interconnected with other utilities as well. And what they want to do is maximize the power generation from those that are the most efficient and minimize the power generation from the more expensive. They'll have to run some of these to meet their peak load. So these are all tied together with computers. It's almost like a modern fighter jet. The pilot only gives input of what he wants the plane to do. The computer tells the plane what the computer's flying the jet. We tell the system what we want it to do, but the computer actually operates the plants. Some of the generation guys told me there was code in that program that they didn't know where it came from or what it did. My question is, why don't you remove it? We can't. That might be the tripwire that sets it off.
Oh my goodness.
Now, they have taken steps to eliminate that problem, but that shows you a cyber vulnerability. And it exists today. Now, to what extent they can affect a long-term power outage that would affect, our ability to continue on as we have become accustomed to life, I don't know. There are a few others, but the one that I'm concerned about the most is the one that cost a perpetrator the least amount of money. It's easy to train people to do it. It's a lot easier to train people to shoot out a substation transformer than it is to fly an airplane into a building. Those cells can be put into play and they lay dormant until they're called upon. Now, I've heard in some of these other broadcasts that there are like 9 transformers. If you took those select 9 transformers out, you could take the entire grid down. I don't know where that comes from, and I don't know which 9 they're talking about. But if you were looking to do this today, and you selected certain transformers in, say, Atlanta, Georgia, or Birmingham, Alabama, or Memphis, Tennessee, or some other place where there was already a lot of pent-up tension, you are aware that the United States is not united.
Oh, of course.
There are factions here. And some of those have demonstrated their willingness to use violence and force.
Yes.
Okay. So if you select areas where there's a lot of that kind of tension already pent up and take out certain transformers, those actors are almost certain the next day to take out the others.
Oh, I see.
So you don't have to take out every transformer. You can hit certain major cities, and it may not result in the entire power grid collapsing. But we don't build these large power transformers in the numbers. About 1 in 4 that we buy today come from the United States. Maybe Mr. Trump can do something to alleviate that problem, but it's going to take some time. It's easier to build a new one than it is to repair an old one. You'd have to transport the old one into a shop. They'd have to disassemble it, put it back together, and ship it back. It takes an act of Congress to move one of these things. They're in their final form. Some of these things weigh 500,000 pounds. Now,
oh, wow.
We'll ship them without the insulators, without the oil, without the cooling fins. By the way, the cooling fins are what is usually the target. Easily penetratable by a low power rifle round.
And which would cause the transformer to overheat and basically destroy itself.
Yes, yes. There are protection schemes that will prevent it from destruction, self-destruction. If it overheats, it'll turn power off and take itself out of play. And the cooling fins are easy enough to replace, and you can put the transformer back into service pretty quickly. But they know that now, and they know that if you use a high power rifle and a well-placed shot, that transformer would be destroyed. So we can't fix that quickly.
I see. And in a scenario like explained on the Tucker Carlson show with Dennis Quaid, I believe it was, when they went into the power grid situation, he mentioned a lot about solar flares. So I have to ask, Ron, in your professional opinion, if we were to get hit with a solar flare that took down, wiped out everything above ground as far as electronics are concerned, do you think that there is any hope that we would ever have the power grid back up and running in less than a year's time?
No.
No?
No.
That's what I was afraid of.
Well, that and the EMP.
And an EMP.
Okay. Those would be similar type effects. One's man-made, one's natural. And I have, in the solar business, the reason I moved off grid and the reason I'm in the solar or alternate energy business is to give people an option. If the grid were to take an extended hiatus for any reason, you would have possibly an option. Now, a solar flare might take out my inverter. I have some inexpensive backup plans that wouldn't restore me to 100%, but I could maintain some power to operate, well, for example, to charge some batteries and maintain some powered equipment that would help me under those circumstances, help me survive under those circumstances. But I wouldn't be able to replace everything that I have, and you couldn't buy replacements. You couldn't get them here.
Would you mind explaining that backup plan? Is that a solar setup or solar? Okay.
Yep.
So anything that's not connected to power, right? Like let's say if you had a solar panel set up, as long as it's not connected to a source of electricity currently, does that mean that it will not be affected by an EMP or a solar flare?
If it's not connected, it shouldn't be. Okay. Now let me just state in both of the cases, whether it's an EMP or and with some of my customers, an electromagnetic pulse is their primary concern. It's my least concern. You can easily train and equip. In fact, if I were doing this, I'd say, you immigrate to America. You've already been trained. You don't call me. You'll get a message when you execute the plan. But you get there, you get a job, you become a tax-paying citizen, do nothing to draw any attention. You just got to buy a rifle and some ammo. And when you get word, you do it. Almost undetectable. Very unlikely they would be even caught doing it. We've not caught anybody, I don't think, that has shot a transformer. So an EMP has to be a tuned nuclear device placed in a high altitude above the planet. My son's in missile defense. Okay. He shoots down missiles, ballistic missiles. So I'm like, Nick, what about this? Well, Dad, we would know it when it was launched. What if it were launched from a barge in the Gulf of Mexico? 1 second after, a novel written, I think, but I forget the author. But look it up. 1 second after. That was the event. An EMP put the U.S. in the dark, and it's a novel, but it's one likely scenario of what would happen after such an event. But it's going to take a nation state to put that together. And we do have the capability to prevent that from happening. Whether or not we were successful about it, I don't know, and I don't think it could be pulled off without being detected by U.S. intelligence. Do I think 9/11 happened without the U.S. intelligence knowing about it? That's a real good question. I don't have an answer, but I'm doubtful.
Yeah, there's a lot of red flags there.
Yes. There's a lot of unanswered questions.
Absolutely.
So, but there are a lot of events that happened in the U.S., some of which may be soon to see some daylight, that will show some of our government operatives misbehaved and either permitted or facilitated or took part in some of these catastrophic events. So I don't put it past them. It could happen. If it does, there's not much we can do about it. So for me, I would like to, it may likely take out my system. And I don't have the resources to have a backup and a backup and a backup. But you can put in a Faraday device, a garbage can, seal it good, a steel drum with a band that seals it. And then if you want to, I do, take as much precaution as you can, wrap things up in aluminum, just do all you can to keep that equipment from the energy of an outside pulse. And then following that, you pull out those devices and hopefully it'll be operational. It'll be very limited, in my case, it'll be very limited, but enough to operate certain essential devices. I have some night vision equipment. I have some thermal equipment. If you don't know what a thermal rifle scope or thermal handheld device is, just go on YouTube and look up hog hunts.
That's right.
You can't hide from a thermal scope.
Yeah.
So I could maintain those devices
By putting them in a Faraday bag or Faraday cloth. Okay.
Correct. So some essential things I have covered for. I've had one customer that bought doubles. One is installed and one is in a Faraday cage. For it to be successful for him, he'd have to install that equipment, which he's incapable of doing. But at least he would have it. So, but most people don't do that. But for most people, the EMP they understand that we can't prepare for everything, and we can't even conceive of everything that we ought to prepare for. That's a different subject. But we do the best we can based on our perception of what's most likely to happen. To me, the most likely thing to happen is that which is easy, inexpensive, and can be perpetrated by almost anyone. So the borders, I was concerned about this in following 2001. We didn't have anything like the porous border that we've had recently, and we know bad actors. The government has told us to prepare for some kind of an attack. This is the government under Biden telling American citizens, be prepared, have some flashlights, have some food, have some means to support yourself. We're subject to an event. So I'm going to be prepared for that, which I think is most likely to happen. The solar flare, it's unpredictable. Well, the event is predictable. The effects of it are unpredictable. And to be prepared for the worst case in every scenario is beyond the capability of an individual.
I see. So what are some of the things that we can do to be prepared as well as we can? And how can somebody, survive something like this? What would it look like?
Well, for me, it started off again, understanding that I didn't own any of the essentials for life. So water is the first thing that I'm going to miss if I'm connected to a community water system and there's a general, long-term, widespread grid outage. That water comes from somewhere, and it takes energy, power, to deliver it to me. So at some point, I'm going to run out of water. So you don't have to have a well. You just have to have access to water. So it could be a creek, could be a lake or a pond, but you won't survive long without water. You can go much longer without food than you can water. Most of my customers don't have a well. They don't have access to another water source, so they drill a well. We can power a pump, and many of them can utilize just a hand pump. These things were well water systems for many years had fallen from availability. Well drillers had almost become extinct. But 9/11, since 9/11, there's been a resurgence of interest in people owning their own source of water. And well drillers have a backlog. If you want a well, you're going to have to wait. Get on his list and wait sometimes 6 months or longer.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So we can power that, or you can just. My grandmother she didn't have power. She was born in 1900. She didn't have power until somewhere around 1945. She drew water from a well, 2.5 gallon bucket, and I loved staying. Her husband died in the Depression, so she raised my mother and my mother's sister, her 2 children, alone through that entire time. My mother grew up in a house that just had light bulbs. She had to draw water, no running water in the house. So you don't have to have all of the conveniences that Americans think they have to have. We've been programmed to think that we have to have those things, and we can't live without them. There was a time when I thought the highest state that a human could attain would be to live like a king or a queen. Jonathan, you know, Americans have lived that life.
We sure have.
Compared to life in most places on this planet.
And we take it for granted.
And we take it for granted.
Every day.
We were programmed to think that way. But I've changed my mind. I currently think that the highest form of human existence is the knowledge and the ability to live like a pioneer.
I like it.
Live with little and live well with little. So, some power. Now, if you come and visit me or visit any of my off-grid customers, you'll hardly know that they're off-grid. There are no sacrifices. I have every convenience that I've grown accustomed to. In fact, when I decided to move off-grid, it was part of the mind process. I'm not giving up anything. I've earned it. I've worked hard. So the house that I'm living in is completely off-grid, has no connection to the utility. I have my own power source. I can produce my own food. Creature comfort-wise, I'm the most comfortable in that house than any other I've ever lived in.
That's great. Wow.
But there's one component that I can't assign a qualitative value to. I'm independent. I own all of my own utilities. The only way you could take those from me is come to my place and take them from me. That might be a challenge. But I'm part of an organized community, and so that's part of the process of how you would do this. That's another subject that I might throw on the table for a future discussion, how to organize your community. You're not going to do this alone.
So, Ron, next thing I want to get into is a very controversial topic: is bug in or bug out. I remember watching a John Lovell video one time, Warrior Poet Society.
I probably saw that one.
And he was talking about how a lot of people say, hey, you think that we're just going to go out in the woods and, live off of berries and, build our own huts and do all these things. And he explained how in a lot of scenarios that it's actually better to stay in and protect your house. And I would just like your professional opinion on that, if you don't mind explaining to the audience.
Okay, well, it's a complex subject that involves a number of other related discussions. Number one point, a house is not a defensible structure. So there might be occasions where you have to bug out. Explanation. If you're in a house with your wife and your children and 2 or 3 attackers, in other words, if the cockroaches get on your property, you can't defend the house from within it. They can keep you up 24/7 and sleep most of the day themselves. A few days of that and you're gone. They'll do what they want. If they want to make an example of you, they'll just throw a brick and a Molotov through the window and burn you out, and then turn to your neighbors and say, leave, or we're going to do the same thing to you. So you can ask any combat veteran, they'll tell you the same. You cannot defend that structure. So a couple of cases where you might be forced to leave the house. If your community is not organized and strong enough to repel, let's say, a roving gang of predators, they're armed. Now, for me, I live rural. This is going to be a bigger issue in the urban settings early on. By the time a roving gang of marauders reach my place, they're already seasoned, and I've got a real problem. So therefore, I've got to have an organized community. So we got to have intelligence. We got to know they're there. We got to have the ability to communicate and pull our resources together, and we're going to have to deal with them on our terms. But if they overrun, then you're going to have to bug out. Here's the problem with bugging out in Alabama. If it's during this time of the year, spring through late fall, you're gonna live in the woods that are infested with insects, chiggers, ticks, other inhospitable insects. Mosquitoes will eat you alive. So you're gonna need to pack more than you can conceive and just equipment to deal with that. More soldiers have died in combat from insects than from bullets. And Alabama is tough to deal with. So pray for a good season if you have to do it.
Okay.
So I think it's better to try to avoid that. You might have to have that eventuality. If the United States were still infested with UN troops, they have been here in numbers, and the Blue Hats show up to round up people, I'm just not going to be found. They may destroy my place, and I may have no place to go, but I'm not going to go with them. So that would involve a necessary bug out. But it's not part of my plan to defend my house or to bug out. My plan is to get organized, and we'll give a roving band of marauders the option. If you come here, we're going to eliminate you. If you leave, you leave. And my part of that plan is to have all the contiguous communities in my area as well trained to deal with that as I am, so that There's no place in Alabama for those people.
I see. So it sounds like community. That's the solution.
That is the solution. Yes.
Okay.
You can't do this alone.
That makes sense. And where everyone would share resources and like you mentioned, two people trying to come in your home that they can keep you awake 24/7. So I see. So you would need to actually have someone, guarding the entrance, guarding all entryways into that community. Everyone shares resources.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that does sound like that's how we do it. In worst case scenario, God forbid that was to happen.
Now, that's a very deep and complicated discussion, Jonathan. I've been involved in community organization for well over 10 years. And it's a difficult job. Again, this requires people to do something. When I accepted the truth about 9/11, the truth required me to do something. And when you're going to, communities were organized. My grandmother that I talked about drawing water out of a well with a 2.5-gallon bucket.
Yeah.
She lived in an organized community. There were 6 people on her party line. They knew each other's business. They knew when one of them left, they knew where they were going, when they were going to be back. If they needed something, they just called a neighbor. There was no 911. So there was a time when America was built around community, and it grew up with community. And then I grew up in what I call the garage door era. You mash the door open and leave to work. You mash the garage door down when you get back. You don't even know who your neighbors are. That's a problem.
Yeah, we've become complacent.
Mm-hmm. Got to rebuild that.
Which makes us very vulnerable.
Vulnerable, yes. Yep.
Okay.
Three men that know each other and can work as a team, it becomes a very hard target. And I hear this all the time. The state of, fill it in, sells so many hunting permits a year. Well, let's just say 10,000 hunting permits a year. Well, that's an army of 10,000. No, it's not. That's 10,000 individuals. One well-trained team can defeat 10,000 individuals. You only have to defeat a few of them. The rest of them are going to lay their arms down because they're not equipped to deal with that.
I see.
You become a member of a well-armed and well-trained team. And that's what a well-regulated militia, the necessary ingredient to maintaining a free state. Read the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I remember you explaining that when you spoke at the Bamacary conference.
Only time the word necessary appears in the Constitution, and it's necessary for the security of a free state.
The only time.
The only thing spoken of is necessary.
Sounds like important. That's pretty important then.
You can't bake you can't bake a cake without bread. You can't have a free state without a militia. That's why we're in trouble.
Makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. But men are charged with building and maintaining culture. And in our day, if men wanted to challenge the invasion at the southern border, they'll go to prison. So we don't have a well-regulated militia. The misconduct of government is what the well-regulated militia is in place to prevent. We don't have it. And that explains why government can do whatever they want to do. They can act in a tyrannical manner. They can appropriate power that was never delegated to them. And there's nothing we can do about it.
So to someone watching this podcast, and they have done nothing to prepare for this, and I know that, today with hyperinflation, it's kind of hard enough just to keep up with keeping the bills paid. What are some small steps that some of those viewers can make to just start moving in that direction as far as being prepared?
If you want to stay in your house with some degree of comfort and some security. If the grid were to take a hiatus for whatever reason, we'd be glad to work with them. Now, I'm off grid. I have a growing number of people that are moving off grid, but 90% of my customers are living in the house they want to stay in, on the property they want to stay on. They don't want to go off grid, but if they're forced to be off grid, they want the capability to stay there with some comfort, some security. So that's 9% of my business.
So you have different levels of
Yes.
solar. You don't have to go all out and
You
get
don't have to go off
100% off the power grid.
Mm-hmm.
You can start off with something that, you could get by. If the power grid went down, it could help you, and of course, much better than having nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jonathan, if I were to say to you, life for us has been like a ride on a luxury ocean liner. I mean, we deal with the trivial things, like what's on the entertainment tonight? Hey, let's go up to the bow of the ship and hit some golf balls out in the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what kind of fare we have on the menu tonight? All trivial things. But if I were to say to you, Jonathan, she's taking on water faster than we can bail. It's going down. Could you connect the dots and understand what I mean?
Yes, I can. I can see how most people have no clue what you're talking about. But yes, if you do pay attention to what's going on in our world today, I think I would get the point.
So our options are go down with a ship, swim with sharks, or get in a lifeboat. I sell lifeboats.
Okay.
So in a lifeboat, might you sit on a wooden seat with a splinter? Yep. Are you concerned about it at that point? Once you see the ship and the sharks circling the lifeboat? No. I'll accept the splintered seat. Hey, hand me another can of sardines. I know we had that last night for dinner, for breakfast this morning, but I'm ready for another one. Would you accept that?
Sure.
Because all this lifeboat's got to do is to get us through this troubled water to a better day. If we don't have this problem solved in some reasonable amount of time, it doesn't matter. We've got to get through it.
And in case any of our viewers watching this podcast now, if they missed the fact that that's actually what you specialize in, is getting people off the grid with your solar company, could you please tell the audience the name of your company and how they can reach you?
Mm-hmm. The name of the company is Solar Technology Alabama. We cover the entire state of Alabama. We get a little bit into Mississippi. We because we're located in North Alabama, we're between Coleman and South Huntsville. We get into, it's an hour to the Tennessee line. So we get into southern Middle Tennessee as well. So yeah, you can go off grid if that's your desire. There are no sacrifices. You can be as comfortable off grid as you can on. You're going to be maximally independent. If you just want the lifeboat option, I want to stay in my house. We'll just select certain circuits and we'll put them on a standalone solar power system, and those loads will be on an uninterruptible power supply. If the grid goes away, you'll lose the rest of the house, but you'll keep those critical loads.
Okay.
So, and we've been doing this now for 14, 15 years. We know how to do it successfully, and we know how to help you select those loads so you can maintain enough of your house with comfort that you won't have trouble staying there.
Now, Ron, I know some of the audience is probably thinking, I know every situation might be different, but I mean, a ballpark, about how much would something like that cost just for the average person, just the lifeboat scenario, like you said?
Yeah. Well, most people spend more than they have to.
Okay.
But I'm going to say the average cost of a lifeboat system, and this is the kind of the center of our business. it's going to be 60 to 70,000. Now that'll include some things that you don't think of as being part of a solar system, like a generator. Some days the sun doesn't shine. That's mostly a late summer and winter issue. I do have some customers that don't, these are off-grid, completely off-grid customers that chose not to do the generator. They don't have the wherewithal to maintain a machine like that. So
I see.
I just design them a system, and that's what I do. I'm an engineer. You tell me what you need, what you want, and I'll design a system to do that. Now, your needs are few. Your wants override, and you're going to want some things that you don't need. So you could spend as little as probably 40 or 45,000 on this, but most people are going to spend more than that. And the nice thing about this is that everything we do is subject to the 30% federal tax credit. So, yeah, so if you do spend $50,000 on a system, then you're going to end up with $35K out of pocket. And you're going to reduce your tax bill by the amount. They're not going to take my tax money and supplement your system. They just reduce your tax burden to offset that.
Okay.
So in the end, it's going to cost you about as much as a bass boat or maybe a nice pickup.
Only difference is it could keep you alive, right?
Yeah.
In a worst case scenario situation.
Yes. Now, these systems will save you a little money because you take these loads off of the meter and put it on a separate power source. You own it, and it produces kilowatt hours, the same thing you buy from the utility company, but you power those loads. But these are small loads. They're not the loads that generate the revenue for the utility companies.
Okay.
So we don't power electric stoves, electric ovens, electric water heaters. We don't power heat pumps for heating. We probably can power a heat pump for cooling. And I have some that's what we do. We cool their whole house. I have some that no, I just need my kitchen, my living area, and my bedroom. And so they'll install a mini split. And those are very easy to power for cooling from a solar system. There are reasons for that, but I usually have that discussion with the homeowner so they'll understand why that particular appliance is so attractive for solar. But it's going to be structured for the individual's needs. And I have some that I can't afford much. Can I take it in steps? Yes, we can do that. I've had some returning combat veterans that have little resources, but they're highly motivated to have independence. It's that dependency. They've been there. They've seen it. They come back home. They discover the government they're fighting for on behalf has imported some of the enemy and set them up in this country. And I went over to fight them so I didn't have to fight them here. I get home, here they are. Yeah. So they're highly motivated to provide independence and security for their family, but they don't have a lot of money. We've never turned down anybody. We've never not found a way to give them what they need.
Okay.
So, if you got small resources, you can be satisfied, but with a little, you may want more. But isn't that the case with your life now? You want more than you can get, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we're used to that. So we can solve that problem.
So Ron, very fascinating what you're doing here, and I've learned so much in this podcast. I'm sure my audience has as well. Ron, thank you so much for coming on. Solar Technology Alabama.
Correct.
Audience, please go look up Ron. If you need his services, you can reach him at the information displayed down on the screen below. And again, Ron, it was an absolute pleasure. I really
Jonathan,
appreciate you coming.
I really appreciate you inviting me on board. I hope that this information is useful to your audience. Again, I appreciate it very much.
Yes, sir. And I hope to have you on again in the future.
I look forward to that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.